No, 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 and no. For the last couple episodes, I've been focusing your mind on all the things and ways you need to say yes. But in today's episode, it is time to say no. As we wrap up on 2021 and get ready for 2022, there are certain things that you need to leave behind. Because if you're going to step fully into being the creating maven who is making your unique contribution to the world and getting paid to be yourself, you've got to drop the dead weight. And I'm going to show you how. Hey, creating maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your Reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. I know 2-year-olds have a very bad reputation, but there's something that they have that we've all lost along the way to adulthood. A healthy and very liberal relationship with the word no. You haven't seen a more free and powerful creature than a 2-year-old coming into their own, experimenting with the word no. No, you may not touch them right now. No, you may not take their toy away from them. No, they don't want to eat that unidentifiable mashup you're trying to put into their mouth. No, 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 no. From our end, they can seem bratty and uncooperative, but what if we look under the hood a little bit to see what we can learn? Because they haven't yet been properly inducted into all the rules of polite society, 2-year-olds still have the gift of being clear. They know what they want, unfiltered. It's not lost on them under piles and piles of shoulds and coulds and woulds. They are clear. They have crystal clear clarity, and this makes them very powerful, even if they can't always execute on their wants. Poor babies with their chubby hands and feet, but still they have their great power of clarity. And if they weren't 2-year-olds with the limited power that they have in the world, I have no doubt that they would be able to achieve all that they wanted immediately. That cookie jar wouldn't be able to stand a chance, no matter how high it was placed on the shelf. They're also completely unencumbered, unburdened. They're light and free. They're not carrying around history that tells them what they can and cannot dare to expect. They also don't suffer any fools. If they don't like you, they don't like you. And you're not going to get your grubby hands anywhere near them. They're not sticking around to give you the benefit of the doubt. One look to assess your safety is all that you get. And if you don't pass, they're gone. It's this powerful ability that 2-year-olds have because of their comfort with the word no that I want to harness in this episode. Because don't you want this same clarity for yourself as we get ready to go into 2022? Crossing over into a new year is my absolute favorite time of year. In the days leading up to it, my friends, they know me, I start making calls and getting them into conversations about reflecting on the year that's passing. What have they learned? What did they accomplish? What are they most proud of? What are they most grateful for? So many people don't make it through to the end of any given year, and I always feel a deep sense of gratitude to God for the gift of another calendar year, and I love hearing what other people are grateful for too. I know some people poo-poo this time of year and have the stank and very cynical attitude about resolutions and all that. And I get it. It can be tiring to feel like you just disappoint yourself year after year. So what's the point of trying in a new year, right? But I don't do resolutions. There are so many other things you can do to commemorate the changing over of a year and set yourself up to take fresh eyes and hope into a new one. One of the things I've done in the past is to have a theme word, something like courage or commitment. It's just a single word that I come back to throughout the year to examine its meaning and use it as a sort of mantra and guide for how I want to show up in that year. On another year, I used a gratitude jar, and this was really nice. I really like this one. I got this huge glass airtight container. It was something that I saw online. And throughout the year, I would write on different colored Post-it notes, things that happened that I was grateful for. And then I would put them in the jar. And then at the end of the year, I read through all of them all over again. It was really nice to revisit those special moments. And the most special ones were the ones that had specific people who did things throughout the year that I was grateful for. So I called them up and I told them that they had made the gratitude jar for that year, and I shared with them what I'd written. And those were really nice conversations because we made these really good emotional connections again. And I was able to thank them again for having made a really great impact on me on that year that passed. So you see, there are lots of different things that you can do. And I love these types of alternatives to resolutions to commemorate a passing year and to help me anchor and get ready for a new one. But the flip side of this that I've learned is that a new year doesn't just require us to take up new things. It often needs us to drop and put a stop to some things if we're going to experience more of what we want. Think of it as drawing a line in the sand. On one side you stand, and on the other side stands the other person or the things that you're warning and saying, you better not step over this line because I'm done with you. I'm done with you in this year. Like, you're not crossing over into the new year. The idea is that, like a 2-year-old, you have to be clear about what you're saying no to. You have to be clear about what you are dropping off. You have to know the dead weight in your life and leave it behind. And believe me, we all have dead weight. We all have things that we're consciously or unconsciously carrying around that is hindering our joy, that is hindering our ability to create. And you know that this is what I ultimately care about. I ultimately care about helping you to leave behind the things that are making it harder or even impossible for you to create. So here are 4 things that you need to say no to and leave behind in 2021 if you're really going to step into being a creating maven in 2022. 1, it's time to say no to the phrase, or rather the sentiment, it's fine. Because no, it's not fine. Saying it's fine is one of the ways we tolerate low-grade, constant dissatisfaction in our lives. And over time, that stuff really bites. So it's time to say no to tolerating. It's time to say no to, it's not that bad. Well, it may not be that bad, but it's not that great either. It's just meh, blah, kind of, but that's not cool. You can't create the beautiful things and experiences you are born to create if your life is packed full of, it's fine. A life of it's fine is a life that's getting clogged up. So I want you to think about all the things that have gotten the label, it's fine, in your life. And I want you to ask yourself, what have I been tolerating? Has that thing come to mind? Well, now I want you to say no. No to more of this. Because the time you spent with it so far is enough already. 2, it's time to say no and leave behind the things in your life that start out sweet, but invariably end up bitter. This is a tough one, and it's gonna take you time thinking a little bit harder about it and getting really honest about some things that you might be avoiding. Sometimes we don't assess things in our lives correctly. Okay, often we don't, but it's because we're often staring at the wrong end of an experience. There are many things that when we haven't been exposed to them for a while, we can completely forget how they left us the last time. All we can remember is the excitement and anticipation that they promise every single time, but they invariably leave us small or wounded or broken. And somehow we forget this. I have a funny story that's an example of this. So when I was in college, the movie What Lies Beneath came out. And if you haven't seen it, it stars Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer and is billed as a supernatural horror thriller film about a couple that lives in a haunted house. And I went to see this with a couple of my college friends, and we were like packed in the dark theater watching it. And then we are like screaming. And there was a moment when we are all screaming extremely loud, really loud at the top of our lungs, like blood curdling screams. We were grabbing each other, probably injuring each other. And something popped off in my head in that moment. And I just thought, this is ridiculous, because I am literally on a daily basis right now. At the time, I was battling countless fears in my life at the time. The war was still going on in Sierra Leone. My parents were there. I was worried about them. And being a William and Mary student around that time, it was just downright scary in other ways because I felt being hazed by our professors. And I was constantly just reading Bible verses every single day about not being fearful and not giving into fear. But here I was in a theater scaring the living daylights out of myself and actually paying people for it. And it just didn't make sense for me in that moment, given everything else that was going on in my life. So I swore off scary movies for a long time after that. And it was a classic moment of how the intrigue of a trailer and the excitement and the exhilaration of what it promised seduced me into thinking, about what I was going to get at the beginning, but I was completely oblivious to how it might leave me in the end. And in the end, I was jumpy and scared, and I was really not entertained at all at the end of that movie. So something that started out sweet and exciting that promised fun just left me in a state emotionally that I never really wanted to be. A sweet thing had ended up being bitter in the end. Now, this is a superficial example, but you can come up with some deep ways that this shows up for us. I'm thinking that, this might be some toxic relationship, which we can constantly get into and circle the drain around, forgetting that our interactions with certain people might start out fun and exciting, but they always end up leaving us poorer in some sort of way or getting into things that we don't really want. And somehow we forget and we don't notice these patterns, but we get seduced into thinking that, oh yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fun, when you need to remember these things always end badly with this particular situation or this particular person. So these are patterns that we get seduced into and forget, and we must stop doing this in 2022. It's time to pay closer attention to the things you're involved in. Forget what they promise. Forget what they always look like on the front end. Fast forward in your mind to the end and remember how they leave you. You've been here before. Don't get suckered again. It's time to say no to the things that start out sweet but end up leaving a bitter taste in your mouth. Ask yourself, how does this thing typically leave me? And then act accordingly. Connected to this point that I've been making is the third thing you explicitly need to say no to in 2022. 3, it's time to say no to betting against patterns. There are many things in your life that are a merry-go-round. Maybe they don't start out sweet and then end up bitter, but there's just a pattern about them. It's Groundhog Day. You know where it's going to end up, but you always end up holding the bag of expectation around it somehow. You're like, oh, well, maybe it'll be different this time, after it's been the same way for thousands and thousands of time. I'm sorry to break it to you, but in some way, you just need to give up hope about that thing going into 2022. You know what that thing is. You know the ways in which you have been betting against clear patterns. And it's time to say no. It's time to stop. 4, it's time to say no to level 9. Now, these things are not meh, okay. They're not like the number one point I was making. They're not the things that fall into the category of it's fine. No, these things are good. In fact, they're very, very, very good. But they're not your level 10 yes. And they've made their way through your life because you're like, oh, it's pretty good. Very good, in fact. They've also got to go for 2022. You can't let them cross over the line. Now, here's my caveat, my sneaky perfectionist. I'm not talking about things you create. I'm not talking about, oh, it needs to be level 10. It can't be a 9. This thing that I'm creating, this experience I'm creating, I can't put it out into the world until it's perfect. No. Quit stalling. I'm not talking about those things. You need to get what you're creating out into the world sooner and faster and prototype it and just expose it to the world and experiment and play around with it. I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking about things in your life you've gotten yourself involved in. Projects, experiences, whatever, but just things that are just taking up space, but they're not exactly hitting the mark of exactly what you want. You just picked them up because, I don't know, you were bored. You didn't want to fill empty space, which we're going to talk about. And you need to clear out those things as well. I think I'm being a little harsh because it's like, okay, what are we supposed to be doing with our lives? Trust me, I'm not being harsh because I'm trying to get you to something very important, which is point number 5, which is the importance of having blank space in your life. I talk about this in episode 5, where I was talking about how you needed to reframe your environment to unleash your creating power. And in there, I talked about how blank space is creating space, which is why 5 is it's time to say no to that one specific project. I don't know what it is for you, but you know what it is. It's come to mind. This is critical as a creating maven. And many people are resistant to it, but there are so many things that you've gotten yourself into, possibly, that are just taking up space. But you need to say no to that thing that you probably took on because you're like, oh, well, I have some available space. And we have this resistance to having empty and blank space in our lives. And so you took that thing on, but you need that blank space. You need it because that is a room and space in which so much creativity and creative ideas blossom and bloom, and you have room for them. And I know, I get it. We have this fear and we think that having blank space in our lives means that we're being lazy or we're being selfish, but it's so important for you as a creating maven. There's no way around it. You need this breathing room. You need it, or else creating can't happen. So please drop that project that you took on to fill blank space. So there you have it. The 5 things you need to say no to and leave behind in order to step into 2022 with your full creating power at your disposal. Leave behind, it's fine. Leave the sweet things that turn bitter. Leave denying patterns. Leave all your level 9 things. And leave that specific project that's getting in the way of you having some blank space in your life. Whenever a new year is about to roll, we're so focused on what we need to add, start doing, or accomplish that we don't realize we have a bag full of dead weight that we need to deal with first. We have things we really need to stop, things we need to say no to and leave behind. And it's hard. It's hard because we're scared. We're scared of a kind of loss, even if we're losing something that we don't want or that's hurting us. Most times we'd rather hold on to familiar pain than open ourselves up to strange joy. We've believed a lie. It's not true. It's not true that anything is better than nothing. Nothing can be a gift. Nothing can make room for not just better, but the absolute very best. And we need to make room for all the good and wonderful things that are coming in 2022. You need to make room for all that you need to do and be in order to become a true creating maven. So here's what I'd like you to do. Rip a blank page out of your notebook or get a blank piece of paper from somewhere and fold it in half. At the top left half of the page, label it 2021. Then at the top right half of the page, label it 2022. Then I want you to think very, very carefully and write 3 things on the left side under 2021 that you are leaving behind in 2021. Now, this is very important. You need to be specific and tangible. I don't mean that you should put abstract things like I'm leaving behind fear or laziness. No, those are too abstract. It needs to be specific, like a specific project that you got yourself into that you need to get out of and leave behind. Or maybe, unfortunately, there's a relationship that is causing you harm and you need to draw a line in the sand around it. It also can't be saying no to the absence of something, like you're leaving behind lack of exercise, not stuff like that. That's leaving behind something that doesn't exist. And that's not what I'm talking about. These must be actual things that you are doing, things that you are involved in, people you are engaging with, that you are drawing a line in the sand around. And it can be no more than 3 things. 3 is the magic number after which we can't remember anything anyway. So keep it simple and most importantly, specific. If you're leaving behind Netflix, it means that you're canceling your subscription. If you're leaving a project, it means that you need to craft and submit your resignation letter. Something concrete that you're going to spend the next 9 days of the year removing or winding down from your life so that when the clock strikes midnight on December 31st, you are prepared and set up to cross into 2022 clean and free of these 3 things. Then this is what I want you to do. In the fold, the crease that's down the middle of the paper, I want you to take a solid black heavyset marker and draw a line straight over it all the way down the middle. Then go back up and draw a line over it again, make it thicker, and then go again and draw a line a 3rd time, making it even thicker. This is you drawing a line in the sand. Now hold the paper up and look at it. Look at the right side. Look at the blank cleanness of 2022. Look at how pristine and open to possibilities it looks. Let this be your reminder not to sully 2022 at all with those things that you plan to leave behind in 2021. When the clock strikes midnight on December 31st, it must be over. Do whatever you need to do now until then to make it happen. Close the door, say no, uncommit. Doing this by January 1st is too late. You'll have already sullied the year if you're still dealing with these three things in some way on that day or beyond it. 2022 must be completely clean and free of them. And I want you to hang this paper up somewhere you can see it so that you are reminded that they have no place in 2022. And anytime they dare pop back up, you remember and will remember that you've already drawn a line in the sand. You've already left it behind. You've already said no. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to do this, my creating maven, if we're really going to set you up to make your unique contribution and be paid to be yourself, then things have to change in the new year. There's got to be no more tolerating, no more living in a fantasy world where you ignore and keep the things that are hurting you, no more wishing that the patterns you see aren't real, no more saying yes to anything that is less than your level 10 yes, no more of that thing, you know what it is, that thing that you needed to have quit yesterday. No more. As we gear up for the new year, here's one thing I don't want you to leave behind. Our 6-step C.R.E.A.T.E framework. That's the roadmap for our journey to turn you into a creating maven that's making your unique contribution to the world. If you haven't looked at it in a while, now is a great time to look it over as we wrap up the year so that you can reflect on where you've made the most investments this year and where you'd like to put more effort next year. If you're new and haven't gotten your copy, then go to my website, reframetocreate.com, and grab your free C.R.E.A.T.E framework e-download. This is a marathon and not a sprint. And this framework is our guide to help you become the person you need to be in order to get paid to be you. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?